Dr. Rogers, good afternoon, sir. Do you acknowledge you are still under oath and still sworn to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Be further examination by the people, Mr. Walden.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Just a couple quick questions. The autopsy photo, people's 206, and just going to the date, were you able to actually look at that during the lunch hour and see that it is, in fact, dated correctly June 25th, 2009? It's just the angle of the photograph?
Yes.
And I think we ended just before the lunch break with you describing People's 30, the large bottle, and describing that the linear opening in People's 30 was consistent with a spike being inserted into the bottle. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And speaking just generally about to identify what a spike is in general terms, looking at People's 157, do you see within this component a spike?
Yes.
And putting this up on the projector just so we all know to what you're referring when you say a spike. Is that this tip here that appears just above the drip chamber? Is this what is known as a spike where I'm pointing here, this tip?
Yes.
And lastly, Dr. Rogers, do you recall looking at some of the evidence, I believe it was on March 29th, 2011, reviewing some of the evidence that has been recovered in this case?
Yes.
And specifically, did you at that time look at and identify what LAPD item 143 was, which has subsequently been marked People's 120. But did you look at LAPD item 143 on March 29th, 2011?
Yes.
And what was it?
It was an IV catheter with a needle still present.
And did you make observations of that IV catheter to see if it appeared to be used or unused?
It appeared unused.
And did you also look at item 142, the syringe from the nightstand, to see if, and again, that's LAPD item 142, the syringe from the nightstand. Did you look at that item to see if it appeared to fit and be able to be connected to LAPD item 143, which is People's 120?
I did look at the item, and it did not appear to fit.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Walden, thank you. Will be cross-examination by the defense, Mr. Flanagan.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Your Honor, I'm going to need exhibit items 137, 172, and 187. Are they
Are they in the boxes there, Mr.
They should
Guido?
be in the box. Document 137, 187 are in, should be in the box. Dr. Rogers, Have you done anything for purposes of refreshing your recollection before testifying here today?
Yes.
Did you review the preliminary hearing transcript?
Yes.
Did you review your coroner's report?
Yes.
Did you review your notes?
Yes.
How about any expert reports? You review any expert reports?
Yes.
Which ones?
I had the reports from our experts
Who's our expert?
belonging to the coroner's office, the neuropathologist, pulmonary pathologist, radiologist, dentist, and anesthesiologist. I also reviewed an autopsy report that was done after our report by Dr. Robert Lawrence, and I reviewed an examination of items relating to the toxicology in our office that was done by Dr. Pustelnik.
Did you review a report by Dr. Stephen Schaefer?
Dr. Schaefer, I believe, was an anesthesiologist. Is that?
Yes, from Columbia University in New York.
Yes, I did.
You reviewed his report.
Yes.
How about, were you given any reports from outside toxicology laboratories, specifically referencing the stomach contents analysis by Pacific Toxicology and the urine test results by Pacific Toxicology?
No,
You were not shown those?
that's correct.
Okay. Now, in analyzing the toxicology results, you look at the results for midazolam.
Yes.
Those results are consistent with the statement made to the police by Dr. Murray, aren't they?
Yes.
And the diazepam, those results are consistent with the statement made by Dr. Murray, aren't they?
Yes.
And the lidocaine results, those results are consistent with the analysis of Dr. Schaefer in his simulation, aren't they?
Yes.
The lorazepam results, based upon Dr. Murray's statement to the police, they make no sense whatsoever, don't they? Or do they? They are not consistent with Dr. Murray's statement to the police, are they? Oh, no.
And the witness is reviewing his materials.
Well, Dr. Murray stated that he gave 2 milligrams of lorazepam, did you say? Was
2
the
milligrams at 2 o'clock and 2 milligrams at 5 o'clock.
at 5 o'clock.
Those don't correspond with the .169 femoral vein at time of death, which was somewhere around 12 o'clock.
Well, I would need to rely on a toxicologist to calculate whether that corresponds.
And the propofol analysis, that's kind of hard to tell because it metabolizes so fast. Isn't that correct?
That is part of the reason, yes. Also, we're not sure how much the doctor gave or how fast he gave it.
And you can't even be certain who gave it, can you?
That's correct.
Now, before we left for lunch, you were talking about this 100 milliliter bottle. The top of it has a defect that appears to you to be more like a spike than a syringe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, why would a person spike a 100 milliliter bottle?
In general, it would be because you would want to set up a constant amount of propofol to maintain sedation.
Spiking the 100 milliliter bottle would also enable you to empty it quicker, wouldn't it?
Quicker than what? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, quicker than, say, a syringe, taking individuals 10 cc syringe level, syringe quantities out.
Yes.
If you wanted to mix propofol in a saline bag, so to speak, be easy, you'd spike it and then pour it into the saline bag, wouldn't you?
Yes, probably.
Propofol, when it's administered by way of drip, is generally administered by putting the propofol into a saline bag and mixing it, maybe 1 gram to 1,000 ml, or 2 grams, or 3 grams. Is that correct?
Dr. Vegas, mixing it in a saline bag.
Do you understand the question?
Well, I'm not sure I do, no.
Okay, re-ask, please.
If a person was going to drip, use a propofol drip, the common way to do that would be to mix it with saline solution, wouldn't it?
That would be one way of doing it, yes.
And in mixing it with saline solution, it's common to see it mixed in ratios of, say, 1 gram per 1,000 ml of saline, 2 grams per 1,000 ml, or 3 grams per 1,000 ml, correct?
Well, I'm not certain what the common ratios would be.
If you wanted to mix 1 gram in 1,000 milliliters of saline, you'd spike a 100 milliliter bottle and empty it in the saline bag, wouldn't you?
Okay, so in that case, you would be placing 1 gram into 1,000 milligrams, 1,000 milliliters of saline, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so that would give you a concentration of
It'd be 1 milligram per 1 milliliter, wouldn't it?
1 milligram per 1 milliliter.
It'd be a 1-to-1 ratio.
Yes.
Propofol is frequently given in a 1-to-1 ratio, or a 2-to-1, or sometimes a 3-to-1, isn't it?
I'm not familiar with how you would dilute it.
Okay. Well, if you were going to use the propofol with an IV bag and you were going to dilute the 1,000 milliliters, it'd be much more efficient to dilute it with a spike than with a syringe, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And emptying a 100 milliliter bottle of propofol into a 1,000 milliliter bag of saline would give you the 1-to-1 mixture, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Now, in the event that that were done, and propofol was administered that way, there would be propofol IV bag, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Because propofol is sticky and it has a tendency to stick to the plastic or a container, doesn't it?
Yes.
And in the event you use IV tubing to empty the 100 milliliter IV bag, you would expect to see residue of propofol in the IV tubing also, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Now, in this particular case, have you seen any IV bag or any IV tubing that had any propofol in it?
The criminalist analyzed the bag and the tubing for propofol. I believe the result was that there was no propofol in the bag, no propofol in the tubing that came immediately out of the bag, and then there was a Y connector, and there was propofol after the Y connector.
Okay. The Y connector is below the syringe, where the syringe is inserted, isn't it?
Yes.
The syringe is inserted into the Y connector.
Yes.
And so the only evidence of any propofol in any delivery device is either in the syringe or the Y connector, which would be below the syringe, correct?
Yes.
And that syringe was positive for flumazenil, propofol, and lidocaine, wasn't it?
Yes.
And the Y connector tubing that leads to the injection site was positive for the exact same things, wasn't it?
Yes.
But no IV bag or no IV tubing was ever analyzed as positive for propofol, was it?
The portion that was above the Y connector was not positive for propofol.
Now, if you were going to fill a syringe, say hypothetically with, say 50 milligrams of propofol and dilute it with 5 ml of lidocaine, and that's all you intended to use, you wouldn't use a 100 milliliter bottle, would you?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Sustain as the form of the question.
Propofol has a very short shelf life, doesn't it, once it's open?
Yes.
And generally, if you don't use the entire contents of a propofol bottle, and it's open for a period of 6 hours or so, you got to throw it away, don't you?
Yes.
So, and propofol comes in 100 milliliter bottles, and it also comes in 20 milliliter bottles, doesn't it?
Yes.
So if you were just going to use 5 milliliters of propofol, it doesn't make much sense to use a 100 milliliter bottle, does it?
No, it would not.
It'd be a waste of about 95 milliliters, wouldn't it?
Yes, assuming that you weren't going to use any more in 6 hours.
So it'd make much more sense to use a 20 milliliter bottle, correct?
Yes, in that
And
situation.
then you're only wasting
Wait, yes, what?
Yes, in that situation.
and then you're only wasting 15 milliliters, correct?
Yes.
Want to get the terms straight. A milliliter is 1,000th of a liter, correct?
Yes.
And a milligram is 1,000th of a gram.
Yes.
Now, this 100 milliliter bottle of propofol would contain 1,000 milligrams of propofol, wouldn't it?
Well, okay, so you're going to have 10 milligrams per milliliter, I believe, of propofol. I'm just written down someplace here. Okay, so propofol is going to be 10 milligrams per milliliter solution. And so the situation that you're talking about is 100 milliliters?
100 milliliter bottle would contain 1,000 milligrams of propofol.
That's correct.
And so if it was your intention to draw out 50 milligrams from that bottle, that would leave 950 left in the bottle, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And if it wasn't used the same day, that amount would have to be thrown away, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Now, propofol, when it's administered, you're familiar with the fact that it's mixed in various ratios with lidocaine. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know why it's mixed with lidocaine?
Yes.
Why is that?
The propofol creates a burning sensation as it goes into the vein, and so the lidocaine is a local anesthetic, and it helps to prevent that burning sensation.
And do you know how propofol is supposed to be administered? I mean, okay,
Sustained.
I can clean that up.
Thank you.
Propofol is not supposed to be rapidly pushed in, is it?
No.
It's supposed to be gradually infused. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in Dr. Murray's statement to the police that you read, it indicated that on that evening, he had infused 25 milligrams of propofol over a 3 to 5 minute period. Is that correct?
I think the original transcript said 25 minutes, but I believe there was an issue about that.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Okay.
The corrected transcript. Can we stipulate the corrected transcript? The time was 3 to 5 minutes.
People stipulate.
Does the defense?
Yes.
Court accepts the stipulation, which means if the parties agree, it's not disputed and the jurors must accept those facts.
Dr. Murray's statement was he infused 25 milligrams over 3 to 5 minutes. Do you have any background that would enable you to determine what level of propofol in the blood that would achieve?
No, I would have to rely on a toxicologist.
Okay. Now, if the propofol was administered 25 milligrams over 3 to 5 minutes between 10:40 and 10:50, in that time range, do you have an opinion as to whether or not that would produce sleep?
It's likely that it would produce sleep.
And do you have an opinion as to how long that would cause a person to sleep as a result of that propofol?
I believe that he would sleep for a matter of a few minutes.
When you say a few, could you put a number? Like, would that be 2, 3, 4, 5? Would you be able to approximate a number?
Well, I believe that the manufacturer shows a chart where they say that if you have a single sedative level of propofol, then you would expect it to go down and the person would wake up within about 5 minutes.
About 5 minutes. Now, assuming that you did infuse this 25 milligrams over the 3 to 5 minutes to produce 5 minutes of sleep, how long would it be before the propofol was entirely out of the person's bloodstream?
Objection, if he knows.
Can you estimate? How long would the objection at this point? If you know.
Well, I don't think I could estimate. I mean, it depends kind of on what you mean by entirely out,
Okay.
because it doesn't go in a straight line, really.
Well, you would agree that the propofol would have no effect after 10 or 15 minutes, would it?
That's true.
That's true?
Yes.
So if it was infused that way, between 10:40 and 10:50, latest being 10:50 at the end of the infusion, the propofol would have absolutely no effect at 11:05 and on, would it?
That's correct if the infusion were stopped at that point.
Now, what happens if rather than infusing it over 3 to 5 minutes, you jam it all at once? 25 milligrams.
Well, the result of that is that you would have a locally high concentration of propofol. That is, it wouldn't have enough time to wash downstream. And so when that locally high concentration reaches the brain, there would be a greater risk of cardiorespiratory arrest.
Okay, so and is that pretty much why most IV drugs are administered fairly slowly, aren't they?
Yes.
Because by administering it kind of slowly, you achieve, that's kind of a way of distributing it more evenly through the bloodstream, isn't it?
Yes.
And if you just come in with a big chunk of it all at once, it can cause problems, can it?
That's possible, yes.
So the medical way to administer propofol, as with most other IV drugs, is to slowly infuse it, correct?
Yes.
Now, if a person is slowly infusing propofol, you can see the effects, can't you?
Yes.
And you can control the effects, can't you?
Objection, since that's not evidence that you're in the room.
The objection is sustained. I think you're going to have to re-ask the question, please.
Well, if a person is slowly infusing propofol with a syringe, would you admit that he would have to be in the same room?
Yes.
And that person is slowly administering that propofol with a syringe would see the effects, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And would you also agree that in the event there was an adverse effect from the administration of propofol through that syringe, you would see it right away, wouldn't you?
Well, I believe you would eventually see it. I'm not sure you would see it instantly.
Well, if a person all of a sudden stopped breathing, you should be able to detect that, shouldn't you?
Yes.
And if while you're administering there, you've got a pulse oximeter, you're going to basically see if there's any changes in the oxygenation or the pulse of the individual, aren't you?
Yes.
If the heart stops, you should be able to detect that right away, correct?
Yes.
Or if the breathing stops, you're going to detect it right away.
That's correct.
And if you sit there and after you've infused that and you watch that patient for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I'm talking about the way we've just been discussing, a slow infusion of 25 milligrams, and you sit there and watch that patient for 15 or 20 minutes. If something goes wrong, it's probably not caused by propofol, is it?
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, hypothetically, you're infusing 25 milligrams of propofol over a 3 to 5 minute period of time. Person goes to sleep. And you continue to watch for another 15 or 20 minutes. After that 15 or 20 minute period of time, if something goes wrong, it's probably not caused by propofol, is it?
Objection, improper, hypothetical, assumes facts not in evidence.
What is being assumed that's not in evidence?
The witness, number one, has testified that the individual would already be awake. Secondly, it's not including the additional benzodiazepines.
I'm sustaining the objection. I don't know if it's a complete hypothetical. Sustained.
Well, if a person, after you've infused 25 milligrams of propofol, slowly over a 3 to 5 minute period of time, and they fall asleep, you would expect propofol to keep them asleep for probably 5 minutes. Is that correct?
Something like that, yes.
And then we go beyond that 5 minutes, and they continue to sleep with normal respiration and normal pulse. You would then assume that they're sleeping for some other reason, wouldn't you?
Well, that would be correct because if you didn't give more propofol, the person would wake up.
Yeah. And so there's other common causes of sleep, isn't there? Other than medication.
Yes,
Probably the most common cause would be fatigue.
that's correct.
If the person was very tired and went to sleep, sleep induced by propofol, and continued to sleep, it's entirely reasonable to conclude that he's sleeping because he's tired. Wouldn't that be correct?
That would be a possibility.
Okay. Now, I want to move on. Well, I'd like to get a couple of definitions from you. Therapeutic level. In your job as a coroner and in analyzing toxicology data, do you ever make reference to the term therapeutic level?
Yes.
What is the therapeutic level?
That's the drug concentration where you would expect the drug to have its intended effect.
Okay. Propofol. Do you have a guideline that you use to determine a therapeutic level of propofol?
Yes.
What is the guideline that you use?
Well, depending on what you're trying to do, if the propofol is being used for major surgery, you would expect it to be somewhere around 4 micrograms per milliliter. If it were being used for lighter sedation, then you would expect a smaller amount,
How small amount?
possibly half of that.
Okay, so 2 micrograms per milliliter. Correct.
Could be therapeutic, yes.
What is therapeutic? The correct therapeutic level would be dependent upon the intended use that you want to make of the propofol.
Yes, in part.
So if you wanted to put a person under such that you could operate, do a hip replacement or open their chest, you'd need a level above 4 micrograms per milliliter, correct?
Yes.
But if you just wanted to put them to sleep for something that wasn't quite as painful, or do a procedure that's not as quite as painful, you might go all the way down to 2 micrograms per milliliter, correct?
Yes.
Now, in this particular case, there was a determination that Mr. Jackson had 2.6 micrograms per milliliter in his femoral blood. Is that correct?
Yes.
And femoral blood is the standard that the coroners find to be the significant level, isn't it?
Yes.
Because, we'll talk about this in a little while, but femoral blood is also called peripheral blood.
Yes.
And in addition to the peripheral blood, which you can get from the femoral vein, you got central blood, correct?
That's correct.
But when it comes to measuring and doing a postmortem measurement, your office is going to rely more on the peripheral blood rather than the central blood, isn't it?
Yes.
And why is that?
The central blood, which comes from near the heart, is more prone to postmortem effects, like, for instance, there might be postmortem diffusion from the lungs, the stomach, the liver, things like that. But the femoral blood, which is further out, and it isn't really near any large organ, has less of that problem.
And this postmortem redistribution, so to speak, is more common in, say, the heart blood, correct?
Yes.
Whereas the femoral blood is kind of the gold standard that coroners use when they do a post-mortem examination in an attempt to predict ante-mortem levels. Did I say that right?
Well, we can tell you what the postmortem levels are now. They may have different relations to the antemortem levels. That's
Okay.
sort of complicated.
My question was,
I'm sorry, it's what?
It's sort of complicated to relate postmortem to antemortem.
Okay, we have various mics here, and for the in-court microphone, I'm having some problems hearing. So if you could speak up a little louder, I think it'll help us out. Thank you.
when you're doing a post-mortem examination, now that's an examination, a toxicological examination after death, correct?
Yes.
When you're doing that kind of an examination, from that you're trying to approximate what the antemortem levels were, correct?
Yes.
And so when you do that, the most reliable source would be the femoral blood as opposed to the central blood.
Yes.
But even that has problems, doesn't it?
In some cases it could, yes.
Because with drugs that are subject to redistribution, the post-mortem levels can be way higher, can't they?
In some cases they can, yes.
Have you ever heard of if you were to ratio central blood to peripheral blood, that would be the heart blood to the femoral blood, a ratio. Like in this case, I believe it's 3.2 heart blood, 2.6 femoral blood. 3.2 over 2.6. That ratio there's been studies that show that is also predictable of the ratio of post-mortem blood to ante-mortem blood. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with those studies.
Okay. Certain drugs are more prone to redistribution post-mortem than others, aren't they?
Yes.
And propofol and lidocaine are drugs that do redistribute, correct?
That's correct.
Now we got some drugs don't redistribute post-mortem, correct?
Yes.
Is lorazepam one of those?
That I don't know.
Have you read Basalt's article on lorazepam and its tendencies not to redistribute after death?
Already answered the question.
Call over the objection. Are you familiar with that?
I have read Basalt's article on lorazepam. However, I don't recall what it says about redistribution.
Could I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Well, the question is, are you familiar with the characterization of redistribution?
I am familiar with what it is.
You may approach.
Thank you. I want to show you just a copy of Salt's article on lorazepam and refer you specifically to the second page that I've highlighted in yellow.
Yes, it says here,
We're
lorazepam.
not interested in what it says. Did you read what Mr. Flanagan just showed you?
Yes.
Mr. Flanagan.
Is Basalt's article in that respect? Do you rely upon this on Basalt's book?
Yes.
And would you rely upon Basalt for determining specific properties of drugs?
Yes.
And Basalt indicates that lorazepam does not redistribute. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we have some evidence of that in this case here, don't we? Okay, I'll withdraw it. The postmortem level of lorazepam in the heart blood was 1.62,
0.162.
and in the femoral blood it was 0.169, wasn't it?
Yes.
And so that's the only substance analyzed where it was actually higher in the femoral than it was in the heart, correct?
That's correct.
And so that would kind of confirm that postmortem redistribution is not going on with lorazepam, is it?
If you know, you may answer. Overruled.
It would suggest either that it's not going on or that it's more or less the same in these two areas.
Well, those measurements are really close enough to just be considered equal. Is that correct?
They are very close.
What level? Well, first of all, let me ask you about lorazepam. Are you familiar with the absorption qualities of lorazepam?
Qualities.
Do you understand the question?
Well, I
Oh, you're thinking about it, so I'm going to sustain the objection. Vague and ambiguous. Re-ask, please.
Okay. If you were to consume a 2 milligram tablet of lorazepam, how long do you think before you would reach your peak level from that tablet?
I would estimate perhaps half an hour to 45 minutes.
And if the Basalt study says, the studies say 2 hours, would you disagree with that?
Well, I couldn't disagree with what the study says, I suppose.
If you take lorazepam IV, you're going to reach your peak, and it would probably be infused kind of slowly, but you'd reach your peak at the end of the infusion, wouldn't you?
I'd object. It's beyond his area of expertise, Your Honor. He's not a pharmacologist.
Overruled.
It would take a while for the lorazepam to get mixed into all the blood circulation. It probably would be on the order of a minute or two before you reach the peak effect.
Okay, so it takes a minute or two for the IV thing to distribute and kind of equalize out, form an equilibrium in the body.
Yes.
And if you do it intramuscularly, it takes anywhere from about 5 to 20 minutes,
Something like that, yes.
because that's not directly into the bloodstream, is it?
No.
It's got to redistribute into the blood, doesn't it?
Yes.
But if you take it orally, it's got to absorb into the stomach, doesn't it?
Yes.
And when a pill goes into the stomach, it's not really absorbed into the rest of the body until it dissolves, is it?
That's correct.
So if you're doing an autopsy and there's stomach contents, and there were in this case, weren't there?
Yes.
And I believe there was there 73.5 grams of stomach contents?
I'd have to look at the autopsy report here. Uh, 70 grams.
70 grams?
Yes.
Okay. And that entire 70 grams was scooped out?
Yes.
I believe you used a ladle or something like that.
Yes.
And when you examined, you did a visual inspection, you saw it was just a dark liquid, wasn't it?
Yes.
But it wasn't blood, was it?
No, it was not obviously blood.
It could have been some blood in it,
Yes.
but it also could have been some fruit juice in it.
That's possible.
You never did really identify exactly what the makeup of that stomach contents was, did you?
No.
And you didn't ask that it be done by a toxicologist.
No.
But you did examine it to see if there were any, I think you call it tablets or capsules.
Yes.
And you didn't see any tablets or capsules, did you?
No.
But that doesn't mean that there weren't any drugs in the stomach, does it?
No, it does not.
Because when the drugs, like, say, pills or tablets or capsules go into the stomach, they're supposed to dissolve, aren't they?
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, they've got to dissolve before they're absorbed, don't they?
Yes.
And so if a person takes, say a person took some lorazepam tablets, those would have to dissolve before they were absorbed, wouldn't they?
Yes.
And so you really cannot tell by just looking at the stomach contents whether that person has taken any lorazepam tablets, can you?
You cannot, no.
And so the only way to determine whether there's lorazepam in the stomach would be to do a toxicological analysis. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if you did a toxicological analysis and you found that there was 0.64, there was 0.64 lorazepam in the stomach, that would be evidence of consumption of lorazepam pills or ingestion of lorazepam pills, wouldn't it?
Now, are we speaking of 0.64 milligrams?
Micrograms per milliliter.
Okay, 0.64 micrograms per milliliter. And the stomach contents is going to be 70 milliliters. Okay, so we're going to have 0.64 micrograms per milliliter. It's 56. 60. Well, I probably would do better with the calculator, but
I don't know what you're trying to calculate.
What
What is it you're trying to calculate? The calculation might have already been somewhat done.
well, what I'm trying to figure out is how many milligrams of lorazepam are there in the stomach? we take our whole 70 grams and figure out how much that would be.
We've already had a calculation done on that that's based upon 73.5 milligrams or grams in the stomach. I mean, that's close enough, 73.5. There was a calculation done and that the lorazepam concentration was 634 nanograms per milliliter. There's a volume of 73.5. You see the math?
Yes.
What exhibit, please?
That's 172. And the amount in stomach is 0.046599 milligrams. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, well, that has nothing really to do with the question I asked before, does it?
Objection. Then why is counsel reading it to him?
I don't understand the question and
Okay.
to what it's referring. Sustained.
What I'm asking you is if we got a 0.634, now this is 634 nanograms, that would be 0.634 micrograms, so we're going to keep everything in the same numbers, right?
Yes.
And the femoral artery had 0.169 micrograms per milliliter concentration, didn't it?
Yes.
And so basically the concentration in the stomach is about 4 times what it is in the femoral artery, isn't it?
Yes.
And so that can't really be accounted for by part of those dark contents in the stomach being blood, can it?
No, I don't think so. I think there would have to be some oral lorazepam taken somewhere along the line.
Yeah, it appears that there has to be some oral lorazepam taken somewhere along the line. Now, when you take lorazepam, it takes time for it to absorb, doesn't it?
Yes.
Now, this has also been described as being about 1/43 of a pill. It's 1/43 of a single 2 milligram tablet. But from those numbers, you cannot tell how many tablets were consumed, can you?
No, except that it was at least 1/43 of one.
That's the minimum, isn't it? But in the event that the person, say, took 8 pills, 8 lorazepam pills, 2 hours before 12, say at 10 o'clock. If you took those 8 pills at 10 o'clock, you'd expect them to have dissolved and pretty much been absorbed, wouldn't you?
Assuming he's taking them on an empty stomach, yes.
But you wouldn't be a bit surprised if there was a remnant still left, would you?
There might be a remnant, yes.
And would you consider 1/43 of a pill to kind of be a remnant?
Yes, it could be a remnant.
Okay. Now, when you saw the level of lorazepam at 0.169, did that cause you to want to take a second look at it?
Do you understand the question?
No, I don't think I do.
Sustained. Yes.
Did the level, the blood level of 0.169, did that stand out to you?
I'm not especially, no.
Not especially.
It's not a very large amount.
Do you know how many pills of lorazepam it would take to get to a .169?
No.
Now, this lorazepam, it could, we got,
You're opening up,
I'm opening up 107. You know, I'd like to approach the witness, show him this pill bottle.
yes.
Is that a prescription bottle for lorazepam?
Yes.
Does it say take one pill at bedtime for insomnia?
Yes.
Now, how many pills are in that bottle? Wonderful.
There are 9.5 pills
9 tablets?
and a half.
Could you put those tablets on this black thing? Could I show the jurors those tablets?
Counsel can publish them. Just be careful when you're walking. Starting in front of jurors 1 and 7 and working to jurors 12 and the alternates. And back. Placing into the container. Correct? Dr. Rogers?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that was an original prescription of 30,
Yes.
and we also had another empty bottle that was found in the somewhere in the Mr. Jackson's bathroom that without a top. Can I approach with that? Yeah.
Is this also from 107?
This is number 187.
Okay. Have you replaced the container into 107 so we can have the record very clear?
Yes, I have.
It's replaced. Now you've removed something from what exhibit?
I removed it from 187.
Thank you.
I believe this has been referred to as the empty lorazepam pill bottle that was found on June 25th in Mr. Jackson's private bathroom.
Yeah, in the state's testimony was found on June 26th.
June 26th. I'm sorry.
All right. With the clarification overruled.
And that's the same. That's the one, take one tablet at bedtime for insomnia.
Yes.
Okay, now, you understand therapeutic dosing for lorazepam, don't you?
Approximately, yes.
You felt that the lorazepam, well, you felt that benzodiazepines had a part in the cause of death, don't you?
Yes.
187's been replaced. Thank you.
I'll put it back in the box.
Thank you.
Now, there were other benzodiazepines other than lorazepam in the blood. Is that correct?
Yes.
There was diazepam, wasn't there?
Yes.
But your analysis of that showed that it was an insignificant quantity, didn't it?
That's correct.
And there was midazolam in the blood, but that was also in an insignificant quantity. Correct?
Yes.
But the lorazepam, do you know what level you could achieve by taking one of those pills? Maybe I could approach with the lorazepam.
What do you mean by the word level? Could you could
Blood level. Blood level, micrograms per milliliter.
Well, with one of those tablets, I would expect the person to have a therapeutic concentration, which should be somewhere between 0.01 and 0.24 micrograms per milliliter.
Should I approach with this, Your Honor?
Yes.
I want to show you Mr. Basalt's treatise on lorazepam.
Objection relevance unless you rely on it.
Sustained.
You've read that article on lorazepam before, haven't you?
Objection relevance unless he relied on it in forming his opinion in this case.
The objection is sustained. 801, 802, 804.
Well, do you rely upon that article to achieve your opinion in this case as to the therapeutic level?
Yes.
Overruled at this point.
Mr. Basalt's article there says that one pill of lorazepam will get you to a 0.018 level. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, and that's a 2 milligram pill, isn't it?
Yes.
And you should reach your peak in about 2 hours, correct?
That's correct.
What's the half-life on lorazepam?
The half-life is between 9 and 16 hours.
Okay, so now we got one pill that will get you to a 0.018. And we've got a blood level of 0.169. Correct?
Yes.
To achieve that blood level, you need somewhere between 9 and 10 pills, don't you?
Objection. Many other variables are
The
considered.
objection is sustained.
Well, you need somewhere between well, in the event that one pill is going to take you to a 0.018, how many pills would it take you to get to a 0.169?
Same objection.
Sustained. Are you asking the witness to assume that there's no other means of ingestion or administration
No,
of
I
lorazepam?
was going to go through that. I just can't go through it all at once.
Well, but the hypothetical on its own may assume facts not in evidence. It may call for speculation.
Okay. Let's assume a 2 milligram injection, IV injection at 2 o'clock of lorazepam. Let's assume another 2 milligram injection of lorazepam at 5 o'clock. We've now got 4 milligrams injected. Correct?
Yes.
And the bioavailability of an IV injection of lorazepam would be 100%, wouldn't it?
It should be close to that, yes.
And bioavailability means the percentage of the drug that you actually get into your blood from the source, correct?
Yes.
Now, the bioavailability of lorazepam in pill form is 93%, isn't it?
If you know, if not, let us
Well, I don't know.
sustain.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Well, he says he doesn't know, so I don't know if you're going to be getting to, if he relied on anything. So I think you got to get there first.
This lorazepam level that's...
Well, wait, what are we showing?
I'm showing the lorazepam article by Basalt that he's already stated he relies on.
The question isn't relies on, the question is...
Can we go back to the podium, please? What's the objection? Mr. Baldwin.
I'm trying to remember the question, Your Honor.
How about if I re-ask it?
The objection is, he's not indicated he relied on this article in forming this specific opinion.
The objection sustained as to the specific question.
Okay. Mr. Rogers.
Dr. Rogers.
Dr. Rogers. If the Basalt article indicated that the bioavailability of oral lorazepam was 93%, would you rely upon that for your opinion?
Objection of relevance.
The objection is sustained. The question is, has he relied on it in terms of any opinion he's offered? Sustained.
Have you read the Basalt article on lorazepam?
Yes.
And have you relied upon it?
In this case, for that opinion?
Wait a minute. Is there an objection?
Yes, objection.
What's the objection?
He has not indicated for the foundational purposes that he relied on it in forming that opinion in this case.
Well, I think that's the question. Re-ask it, please. Have you relied?
Have you relied upon it to determine the bioavailability of oral lorazepam?
No.
Is that because you forgot what you read in the article?
Well,
Objection misstates the testimony that he formed that opinion in this case.
The objection sustained. It assumes facts not in evidence.
If you were to read Basalt's article, would it refresh your recollection as to the bioavailability of lorazepam
Objection
by
of
oral?
relevance.
Sustained.
So as you sit here right now, you have no idea whatsoever the bioavailability of oral lorazepam?
that's correct.
The lower the bioavailability, the more pills it would take, isn't it? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you know whether or not the bioavailability is above or below 90%?
Objection. That's the answer. He says he doesn't know.
Sustained.
Could you estimate?
Objection of relevance.
Sustained.
Based upon, well, can we approach, Your Honor?
Yes.